Yes, it has been 6 months since the East Palestine train derailment and subsequent detonation that rained a shower of toxic carcinogenic chemicals over the small town. Despite hearing not much about it in the mainstream media, with few exceptions, the town of East Palestine is still reeling with problems from this derailment, whether it be folks who are still dealing with health issues, creeks that are still very much contaminated, folks being forced now to be moving back into their homes after a cleaning program which is far, far below what it should be, and a whole lot more. I'm actually taking a break right now from packing to get back to East Palestine for my 4th reporting trip with Status Coup to the small town, primarily thanks to our members for being able to afford these trips to continue to go back. More on that in a second here. But on this trip, we're going to be diving into a couple specifics, and I'm going to go through a couple to give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect from this week of reporting on the ground in East Palestine with me, as well as John Farina on the ground. So we're going to start by kind of getting into the cleaning program that I broke the news on earlier this week. This cleaning program is wholly insufficient. It looks very similar to the cleaning program that happened back in February, which was actually the first story that I put out on East Palestine. This cleaning program is focused on dust, not on chemicals. These cleaners are not hazmat certified. They're not using any sort of cleaning techniques that are used for chemicals. They are cleaning up dust from the containment zone that the EPA is saying is not contaminated at all. That is not the primary concern from residents, as we've reported on. The primary concern is, hey, am I going back into a situation where I'm putting me and my children's health at risk going into these homes? We're going to be talking to at least a couple of residents who are going through with this cleaning program and needing to move back in, because otherwise they're going to be on the hook for paying for their own relocation, because after this cleaning program goes through, according to the EPA, Norfolk Southern, on their website, the money is essentially running up. It's expected that you will move back into your home after this dusting of your home, essentially. So we're going to definitely be speaking with residents who are going to be directly affected by this, obviously, as part of it. Another thing we're going to be covering is many residents are still dealing with health concerns. Some of them are folks who have been needing to go in and out of work in the town of East Palestine. Some of them are folks who've just decided to stay. Some of them are folks who dealt with issues earlier on. We're going to be speaking with a few new faces here, folks that have not been on Status Coup before, have not done much media, including some folks who were actually dealing with seizures as a result of this. That is obviously a very serious concern, so we're going to be looking more into that on this trip. In addition to the seizures, we're going to talk to other residents whose children have had issues whenever they've come back into town and are now just stuck in this impossible position where they're on the list for house cleaning and they essentially need to move back in, or they're on the hook for their own money to be able to pay for a hotel, an Airbnb, or whatnot for a place to stay. That is not a situation you want to be in if you or your children were getting sick the last time they were in town. So we're definitely going to check in on that. Also, again, 6 months later, we're seeing videos from both Sulphur Run and Leslie Run that look wildly contaminated still, especially when you stir up the bottom sediment. It seems like those creeks really have sure, there's not water floating on the surface anymore, or chemicals floating on the surface anymore, but these are still very much contaminated, dangerous to be in many cases unless you're wearing the proper equipment. We've seen videos from Dr. Chai, as well as Christina Seisloff. Those are both residents of the East Palestine area. Christina's over the border in Pennsylvania, where they've been out kind of checking in on these creeks. So we're going to get out on the ground with them to go see the situation firsthand of what these creeks look like. Again, 6 months later, you still have creeks that, when you stir up the bottom, look like a rainbow coming up with all sorts of different chemicals from the derailment back in February. We also are going to have an update. Several residents, some of them part of the Unity Council, others just, getting their voices out there, who are trying to essentially get into village government. We've got somebody running for mayor against the current mayor of East Palestine. The current mayor is Trent Conaway. Initially, Mayor Conaway was not going to run for re-election. Now it's sounding like he's going to finish what he started and essentially go ahead and run for re-election again. Several members of the community not excited about that. I'm sure some members of the community are. So we're going to get the lowdown. Hopefully we'll get an interview with the new mayoral candidate. I've tried reaching out to Mayor Conaway in the past. He has never responded to email, text message, phone calls. We'll try again, just to get both sides of that, as well as a couple residents running for city council as well. So we're going to try to get interviews with those folks and find out why they're unhappy with the current village leadership. Many of these people who are running because of what they've seen their village government do in regards to the train derailment. Lastly, we're also going to get some updates from the Unity Council after their DC event a couple weeks ago. Not DC event, but trip down to DC. They brought several members down to go speak with members of Congress, members of the Senate, and they had a couple success stories out of it. So we'll ultimately see if it goes anywhere. Unfortunately, right now, the legislation on railway safety has been sitting in limbo for 6 months. Again, as I've said, from the beginning, I've kind of said the longer this bill takes to get through, the less likely it will to actually become law. I hope I'm wrong, but we will ultimately see there. But the reality of this situation is that all of this reporting is only possible by members like you, or potentially a viewer like you who is not a member yet, to contribute to Status Coup to make these trips possible. It's literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. That's the price of a cup of coffee, a cheap beer, whatever it may be. Not a cheap beer, $5 isn't that cheap, but you know what I mean. $5 a month is the way to do it. It might not sound like a lot, but when you get hundreds and thousands of you together to be able to do it, it makes a huge difference. Find me somebody who's doing the coverage like we've done on East Palestine, and I mean, you can't. That's the thing. You can't. We've been there on the ground time after time after time, staying in touch with residents throughout. I'm not saying nobody else is doing it, but there are not many. These stories need to be heard. This could happen in insert your small town in America. Things like this have happened. We've got reporting from Jordan in Flint over the last 8-9 years of what's going on there. Kalamazoo, Jackson, Mississippi, all of these places. If no one continues to go back and tell these stories, they're forgotten and their problems are never solved and these people are left to suffer. So please, if you can support the reporting, statuscoup.com/join is the best way to do that. I'd also encourage you on these trips. Sometimes we'll put out new information on Twitter and whatnot. Follow Status Coup on Twitter. You can also follow my personal Twitter at LewisD217. We'll be posting some things on Instagram, I'm sure, as well. John Farina is always good about making sure that happens. So please, if you're seeing our content while you're on the road or while we're on the road, share it, help get it out to more folks, because sometimes this content isn't the most sexy for the algorithm anymore. It was in the beginning, but reporting on East Palestine 6 months later is not the same story as it was then. It is just as important, if not more important, to do it now, though, because there is not going to be the media attention that we've been used to in the past. Thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and stay tuned for a bunch of new content on the road from East Palestine this week.